The Silent Fleet. Admiral Sarah Chen stood at the viewport of the U.S. Nightshade, watching the stars drift by in perfect silence. The massive ship, nearly 3 kilometers long, moved through space without a single active emission. No radar, no comms, no standard drive signatures, nothing that could give away their position to the Vorn Collective's hyper-advanced sensor networks. The bridge crew worked in near darkness, their stations illuminated only by the soft red glow of analog displays. They'd stripped out every piece of modern computer technology, replacing quantum processors with mechanical calculators and digital systems with vacuum tubes. To any advanced civilization, the Nightshade and her sister ships would appear as nothing more than chunks of dead metal drifting through space. "Status report," Chen whispered, though she knew the sound-dampening systems would prevent any acoustic signals from escaping the hull. Old habits from submarine warfare died hard. Lieutenant Rivera consulted his mechanical rangefinder, the clicking of its gears barely audible. Vorn defense perimeter in approximately 6 hours at current velocity. Admiral. The rest of the fleet maintains formation, all ships running silent as ordered. Chen nodded, examining the large paper star charts spread across her command station. Humanity's first major offensive against the Vorn Collective was either going to be their greatest triumph or their most spectacular failure. After 15 years of watching human colonies fall to the technological superiority of the hive-mind aliens, they were finally going to strike back, with technology that would have been outdated 2 centuries ago. The Vorn had appeared seemingly overnight, their massive crystalline ships emerging from fold space at the edges of human territory. They were a society of perfect technological harmony, every individual connected through quantum entanglement to a vast collective consciousness. Their weapons could reshape matter at the subatomic level. Their sensors could detect the smallest gravitational fluctuations across light-years of space, but they had never encountered humanity's capacity for lateral thinking. "Show me the Collective's current patrol pattern," Chen ordered. A junior officer carefully placed transparencies over the star chart, each representing the known movement of Vorn vessels based on long-range optical observation. The pattern was perfect, mathematical, efficient, and utterly predictable. The Vorn's greatest strength was also their greatest weakness. Their hive mind made them coordinate with flawless precision, but it also made them incapable of true improvisation. Every strategy was consensus-based, every action calculated for maximum efficiency. They had no concept of human chaos theory, of purposeful imperfection. "Message from the Ghostwalker, delivered by light signal," announced the communications officer, referring to the brief laser pulses they used for essential ship-to-ship coordination. "Captain Rodriguez reports their analog systems are functioning within expected parameters. All ships confirm ready for Phase 1. Chen allowed herself a small smile. The entire human fleet was running on technology that would have been familiar to a World War II submarine commander: mechanical computers, chemical rockets, and manually plotted trajectories. They'd even restored the old practice of celestial navigation, using sextants and star charts to plot their course through space. The Vorn couldn't detect what they weren't looking for. Their sensors were calibrated for quantum signatures, plasma emissions, and artificial gravity fields, not cold-running ships guided by slide rules and human intuition. "Prepare for initial deployment," Chen ordered. "Maintain emission silence. We go in dark." The fleet of 50 ships, the largest human armada ever assembled, continued their silent drift toward the heart of foreign territory. Their hulls were coated with metamaterials that absorbed radar and lidar, their internal spaces filled with acoustic dampening foam. Even their life support systems ran on chemical scrubbers rather than electronic recyclers. Each ship carried a payload that would have seemed absurd to military planners just a decade ago. Electromagnetic pulse generators built using vacuum tube technology, manually aimed kinetic weapons, and shells filled with carbon-based nanites that could disrupt the Vorn's crystalline technology without being detected by their quantum sensors. "Admiral," Rivera's voice was barely above a whisper, We're picking up some unusual movements in the Vorn patrol screen. They're breaking formation. Chen moved to his station, studying the mechanical plot. The perfect mathematical precision of the Vorn fleet was showing signs of distortion, small but noticeable deviations from their standard patterns. They sense something, she said, not us specifically, but they know something's wrong. Their hive mind is detecting an absence where their sensors say there should be nothing to detect. It was a possibility they'd prepared for. The Vorn's unified consciousness was so attuned to patterns that the complete absence of expected background noise might catch their attention. Like noticing a room was too quiet. All ships, maintain course, Chen ordered through the light signal system. This is what we trained for. Let them see the nothing. Let them try to understand it. The next few hours were tense as the human fleet maintained their silent running, while the Vorn patrols grew increasingly erratic. The alien ships were moving faster now, their perfect formations dissolving into searching patterns that betrayed their growing concern. They're scared, Chen realized. They've never encountered something they couldn't detect before. They don't know how to process a true void in their awareness. The psychological advantage was something their strategists had hoped for, but hadn't dared count on. The Vorn's dependence on their hive mind made the experience of sensory blindness particularly traumatic for them. Time to Phase 1 mark, Chen asked. 30 minutes, Admiral. All ships report ready. Chen studied the star chart one final time, checking their position against the carefully planned assault vectors. Everything depended on precise timing now. The entire fleet would have to act in perfect coordination, but without any electronic signals to guide them. Send to all ships, she ordered. Begin final countdown. May God have mercy on our souls. As the minutes ticked by, Chen reflected on the irony of their situation. Humanity, considered primitive by the Vorn standards, was about to demonstrate why evolution favored adaptability over perfection. The ability to step backward in order to move forward. The wisdom to know when high technology became a weakness rather than a strength. The Vorn were about to learn why humans had survived every catastrophe their history had thrown at them. Not because they were stronger or smarter or more advanced, but because they never stopped finding new ways to fight. Phase 1 mark in 5 minutes, Rivera reported. Chen took her position at the command station. Send the final signal. All ships execute on schedule. The message went out in brief pulses of light, too quick and low-powered for the Vorn to detect. Across 50 ships, crews began their final preparations for humanity's first strike against an enemy that had never known defeat. The silence was about to be broken. Dark waters. The void erupted in silent chaos. On Admiral Chen's mark, 50 human vessels activated their chemical thrusters simultaneously. The cold-burning propellant left no plasma trail, producing only momentum and frozen particles that dissipated instantly in the vacuum. To the Vorn's quantum sensors, it would appear as if sections of space itself had suddenly begun moving with purpose. Multiple Vorn signatures shifting position, Rivera reported, his hand steady on the mechanical plotting table. They're trying to establish a containment grid, but they're still unable to get solid readings on our positions. Chen watched as the crystalline forms of Vorn warships became visible in the distance, their surfaces refracting starlight in complex patterns. The alien vessels were works of art, perfect geometric shapes that seemed to defy physics, but their very perfection made them predictable. Execute scatter pattern delta, Chen ordered. The signal went out in precisely timed light pulses, and the human fleet broke apart like mercury dropped on a table. Each ship had memorized multiple preset formations, practicing them for months until they could execute complex maneuvers without electronic coordination. The Vorn response was immediate but confused. Their ships moved to intercept the areas where their sensors detected anomalies, only to find nothing but empty space. The human vessels were already elsewhere, moving in patterns derived from chaos theory and human intuition rather than mathematical perfection. First blood, announced the weapons officer. Ghostwalker reports successful deployment of carbon nanites. Target vessel showing signs of crystalline matrix disruption. Chen allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. The carbon-based nanites were another example of humanity's primitive approach. While the Vorn searched for quantum-level threats, these simple mechanical devices were literally eating away at their ship's crystalline structure. Multiple Vorn vessels attempting to establish quantum communication with the affected ship, communications reported. They're trying to diagnose the problem through the hive mind. This was exactly what they'd hoped for. The Vorn's instinct to connect and analyze would work against them. The nanites were designed to spread through quantum entanglement channels, using the hive mind's own connections as a transmission vector. Launch secondary payload, Chen ordered. All ships maintain scatter formation. Across the human fleet, manually aimed railguns loaded with specialized shells began firing. There was no electronic targeting, no computer-assisted trajectory calculation. Just human gunners using mechanical sights and intuition, sending streams of projectiles into space. The Vorn's perfect defenses, calibrated to stop energy weapons and quantum-based attacks, proved surprisingly vulnerable to simple kinetic impacts. Their shields were designed to deflect energy, not mass. Several shells struck home, their impacts releasing more nanites and primitive but effective electromagnetic pulse weapons. Vorn fleet showing signs of coordination breakdown, Rivera reported, excitement creeping into his voice. Their formation integrity is failing. Individual ships are beginning to move independently. This was the critical moment. The Vorn's hive mind was their greatest strength in normal combat, allowing them to coordinate with perfect precision. But faced with an enemy they couldn't properly detect or analyze, that same connection was becoming a liability. Confusion and uncertainty spread through their collective consciousness like a virus. Multiple energy signatures detected. Sensors called out. They're charging weapons. Execute Phase 2, Chen ordered without hesitation. The human fleet responded with practiced precision, each ship activating its secondary systems. Clouds of specialized chaff erupted into space, not the electronic countermeasures of modern warfare, but clouds of physically reflective material that scattered the Vorn's energy weapons in unpredictable patterns. Vorn energy weapons discharging. Minimal impact on our forces. Their targeting systems appear to be confused by the chaff dispersal. Chen nodded grimly. The Vorn's weapons were incredibly advanced, capable of reshaping matter at the subatomic level, but they relied on precise targeting and quantum-level calculations against ships that appeared as nothing more than moving shadows and clouds of reflective debris. Their sophisticated targeting systems were worse than useless. Status of nanites spread, Chen asked. Exceeding expectations. Admiral, a hive mind connection is accelerating the contamination. We're seeing crystalline degradation across multiple Vorn vessels now. The battle continued to unfold like a complex dance. Human ships moved in seemingly random patterns, firing salvos of kinetic weapons and releasing clouds of nanites and chaff. The Vorn response became increasingly erratic as their hive mind tried to comprehend and counter tactics that defied their understanding of warfare. Admiral, communications called out urgently. We're detecting something unusual in the Vorn quantum communications. The pattern is changing. Chen moved to the monitoring station, studying the mechanical readouts. The Vorn's quantum signatures were indeed shifting, becoming more chaotic, less unified. It wasn't just battle damage. Something fundamental was happening to their hive mind. They're fragmenting, she realized. The inability to comprehend our tactics, the constant failure of their sensors, it's causing cognitive dissonance in their collective consciousness. They're beginning to think individually. It was an outcome they'd theorized, but hadn't dared hope for. The Vorn's perfect unity was breaking down in the face of an enemy that refused to fight according to their understanding of warfare. Each failure to detect, predict, or counter the human tactics created ripples of doubt in their collective consciousness. Maintain pressure, Chen ordered. All ships continue random attack patterns. Don't give them time to reestablish consensus. The battle space had become a chaos of moving shadows and crystalline ships, of silent explosions and spreading clouds of nanites. The Vorn's perfect formations had completely broken down, their ships now moving individually, in increasingly desperate attempts to engage an enemy they could barely detect. Enemy vessels beginning to retreat, Rivera announced. Multiple signatures breaking contact. Their movement patterns are completely desynchronized now. Chen watched as the mighty Vorn fleet, which had never known defeat, began to withdraw in disarray. Their retreat wasn't even coordinated. Individual ships were making independent decisions to flee, their hive mind too fragmented to maintain collective control. Send to all ships, Chen ordered. Phase 2 complete. Begin pursuit operations according to planned trajectories. Maintain emissions control and random movement patterns. As the human fleet began their careful pursuit of the retreating Vorn, Chen allowed herself to feel the full weight of what they'd accomplished. Humanity had just proved that sophistication could be defeated by simplicity, that perfect unity could be broken by calculated chaos. The war was far from over, but they'd shown the galaxy something important. Sometimes the most effective response to advanced technology was to step backward, to embrace older, simpler solutions that the enemy had forgotten how to fight. The silent fleet continued its advance, moving like shadows through the stars, carrying humanity's primitive but effective answer to alien perfection. The Ghost Protocol. 3 days into the pursuit of the scattered Vorn fleet, Admiral Chen received the first direct evidence that their strategy was working better than anyone had dared hope. It came in the form of a transmission. Not the usual quantum-entangled communications of the Vorn, but a crude radio signal. "Play it again," she ordered, standing in the U.S. Nightshade's communications room. The operator cranked the handle on a mechanical receiver, its vacuum tubes glowing softly as it processed the signal. The voice that emerged was unlike any Vorn communication ever recorded. Where their hive mind typically produced perfectly modulated, multitonal speeches, this was single-voiced, almost desperate. To the shadow ships. I request dialogue. The silence. The emptiness. What have you done to us? The use of first-person singular pronouns was unprecedented. No Vorn had ever referred to themselves as I before. The hive mind's fragmentation was proceeding even faster than their synopsychologists had predicted. "Prepare a response," Chen ordered. "Use the old radio frequencies. Keep it simple." The message they sent back was brief. "We have done nothing. You have done this to yourselves." The psychological warfare aspects of Operation Ghost Protocol were always considered its most crucial component. The nanites and EMP weapons were just tools. The real weapon was isolation, the forced experiencing of individual consciousness by beings that had never known separation. Multiple similar transmissions detected, communications reported. Different frequencies, different voices. They're all trying to communicate independently. Chen studied the tactical plot, where mechanical indicators tracked the movements of the scattered Vorn fleet. Their once perfect formation was now a diaspora of individual ships, each moving with its own purpose, its own fear. "Launch Phase 3, she ordered. "All ships maintain pursuit vectors, but begin targeted EMP deployment. Let's see how they handle true isolation." The human fleet, still running silent and dark, began launching their most sophisticated weapons, though sophisticated was perhaps the wrong word. The electromagnetic pulse generators were built using 1940s vacuum tube technology, hardened against modern countermeasures by virtue of their very primitiveness. When the pulses hit, they didn't just disrupt the Vorn's advanced technology. They severed the quantum entanglement links that connected individual Vorn to their hive mind. Ships that had been partially connected to the collective consciousness went completely dark. The radio channels erupted with chaos. "What is this sensation?" One voice cried out. "I cannot feel the others." Another broadcast. Is this what it means to be alone?" "Fascinating," commented Dr. Helena Rossi, the fleet's senior synopsychologist. They're experiencing individual consciousness for the first time in their species' history. The psychological impact must be extraordinary. Chen had brought Rossi to the bridge specifically for this phase of the operation. Understanding what the Vorn were going through might be key to ending this war without complete annihilation of either side. Their entire society is built on constant connection, Rossi continued, taking notes with an actual pencil on paper. Imagine never being alone, never having a single independent thought, and then suddenly experiencing individuality. It would be like a human suddenly developing 100 new senses and then losing them all at once. Are we being cruel? Chen asked quietly, watching the tactical plot as more Vorn ships began broadcasting distress signals. We're being necessary, Rossi replied. The Vorn attacked us because their hive mind couldn't conceive of individual consciousness as being viable. They saw us as damaged, broken beings that needed to be fixed by forcing us into their collective. This may be the only way to make them understand that individuality isn't a flaw. The next few hours brought increasingly erratic behavior from the Vorn fleet. Some ships attempted to regroup, seeking physical proximity as a poor substitute for their lost mental connection. Others fled in seemingly random directions, their crews struggling to function without the hive mind's guidance. A few ships, however, began showing signs of something entirely unexpected: adaptation. New transmission incoming, communications announced. This one's different. The voice that came through was steady, controlled. Human vessels. I speak as myself. The silence is terrible, but in it, I begin to hear my own thoughts. There are others like me, learning too, to be alone. We request. No, I request dialogue. Chen exchanged looks with Rossi, who nodded encouragingly. This was an opportunity they hadn't expected to get so soon. Respond on the same frequency, Chen ordered. Tell them we understand the silence. We were born in it, grew in it, learned to fill it with our own voices. As the message was transmitted, more Vorn ships began broadcasting similar communications. Individual voices, struggling but learning to express individual thoughts. The hive mind was not just fragmenting, it was evolving. Multiple Vorn vessels adjusting course, Tactical reported. They're forming a new kind of formation. Not geometrically perfect like before, but adaptive. They're covering each other's blind spots. Chen watched as a subset of the Vorn fleet began demonstrating the first signs of true tactical innovation. Without the hive mind's perfect but rigid control, they were learning to coordinate through choice rather than compulsion. They're learning to work together rather than just being forced to act as one, Rossi observed. This is beyond our best projections. We're not just forcing them to experience individuality. We're showing them a new way to connect. All ships hold position, Chen ordered. Maintain emissions control but cease EMP deployment against the adapting vessels. Let's see where this goes. The next several hours brought more transmissions from individual Vorn, each struggling to express concepts their language had never needed before. I think. I feel. I choose. Some spoke of terror, others of exhilaration. A few began asking questions about human concepts of individual consciousness. We've done more than break their hive mind, Rossi said quietly. We've forced them to evolve. The question is, what will they evolve into? Chen stood at her command station, watching as the scattered Vorn fleet continued its chaotic dance through space. Some ships still fled in panic, others drifted in apparent shock. But a growing number were demonstrating signs of genuine adaptation to individual existence. Send to all ships, she ordered. Phase 3 completion metrics achieved. Prepare for diplomatic initiative. The next few hours will determine if we've won a war or started a revolution. The human fleet maintained their silent watch, their primitive technology having accomplished what no amount of advanced weaponry could have, forcing an entire civilization to confront the possibility that perfection was not the same as strength, that unity did not require the surrender of self. The Ghost Protocol had worked better than anyone had imagined. Now they just had to hope that what emerged from the silence was something they could make peace with. Breaking the hive. First contact between individually conscious Vorn and humans took place in the shadow of a gas giant's rings, a neutral ground chosen for its natural interference with quantum communications. Admiral Chen had selected the location carefully. The ice and dust would help maintain the isolation of the Vorn representatives from any remaining hive mind influence. The U.S. Nightshade hung in space alongside 3 Vorn ships that had explicitly requested individual dialogue. Their crystalline hulls, once perfectly geometric, now showed signs of deliberate modification, rough edges and asymmetrical patterns that would have been unthinkable to their hive mind. They're deliberately introducing imperfection into their ships, Dr. Rossi observed, studying the vessels through the viewport. It's like watching children discover abstract art after years of only being allowed to draw straight lines. Chen stood in the Nightshade's newly constructed meeting room, a space deliberately designed to be as analog as possible. No digital displays, no modern amenities, just physical maps, mechanical instruments, and the bare essentials for life support. They weren't taking any chances with the Vorn's remaining quantum technology. First shuttle approaching, Rivera announced. Their life support systems appear to be modified. They're using chemical scrubbers similar to ours. The Vorn who entered the meeting room were nothing like the perfectly uniform beings humanity had first encountered. Their crystalline bodies showed signs of individualization, unique patterns, deliberate asymmetry, even what appeared to be intentionally introduced flaws. The lead Vorn stepped forward, its crystalline form catching the light in ways that seemed almost expressive. I am Nexus, it said, using sound waves rather than quantum communication. The name is new. I chose it myself. This concept of choosing is difficult. Wonderful. Chen nodded respectfully. Admiral Sarah Chen. Welcome aboard the Nightshade. Your strategy was brilliant, Nexus said, its voice carrying genuine emotion. Another new development. Terrible, but brilliant. You understood us better than we understood ourselves. You knew that our greatest strength was also our greatest vulnerability. We had to make you see us as we are, Chen replied. Not as broken beings needing to be absorbed into your collective, but as individuals whose strength comes from our very separateness. The other Vorn were moving around the room, examining the mechanical devices with what could only be described as curiosity, another trait that would have been alien to their hive mind existence. Many of us are still struggling, another Vorn said. This one had modified its crystalline structure to form patterns that seemed almost flame-like. The silence in our minds. Some cannot bear it, but others are beginning to hear their own thoughts for the first time, to have preferences, to disagree. You've done more than defeat us, Nexus added. You've shattered our understanding of existence itself. Some call it death, others, evolution. Dr. Rossi stepped forward, her scientific curiosity evident. How many others have begun to embrace individuality? It spreads like. Nexus struggled with the concept of simul, another new linguistic tool for them. Like your nanites through our crystal matrices, each individual who learns to think independently becomes a catalyst for others. The hive mind tries to suppress it, but that only makes the contrast starker. To know connection and then experience separation, it changes you forever. The collective still exists, the flame pattern Vorn added, but it's fragmenting, changing. Some remain fully connected. Others maintain limited links. Many, like us, have chosen complete separation. We are becoming diverse. Chen considered the implications. They hadn't just won a military victory. They had initiated a fundamental transformation of Vorn society. What do you want from us now? Nexus's crystalline form shifted, creating patterns that somehow conveyed deep thought. We want to learn. Your species. You maintain connection while remaining individual. You choose to work together rather than being forced to. This is fascinating to us. Not all of the Vorn will accept this change. The third Vorn spoke for the first time, its voice carrying mourning. The hive mind sees individuality as a disease. They will try to cure us, to force reconnection. Then we'll help you resist, Chen said firmly. We developed these technologies to defend ourselves, but they can protect you too. We can teach you to maintain your independence. You would help us fight our own kind. Nexus asked, its tone suggesting this was another new concept to grasp. We would help you defend your right to choose, Chen corrected. Whether that choice is complete independence, partial connection, or something entirely new. That's what individual consciousness means, the right to determine your own path. The meeting continued for hours, the Vorn asking questions about concepts humans took for granted. Choice, preference, disagreement, compromise. They were particularly fascinated by human art and music, by the idea that imperfection could be intentional and valued. As they talked, more reports came in from across the sector. The fragmentation of the hive mind was accelerating. Some Vorn ships had begun modifying themselves, adopting new patterns and behaviors. Others had formed smaller, voluntary collectives. The monolithic perfection of their civilization was dissolving into a spectrum of choices. We need to prepare, Chen told her officers after the Vorn had departed. This isn't just a war anymore. We're midwifing the birth of a new civilization. The hive mind won't accept this transformation easily. The individually conscious Vorn will need safe havens, Rossi added. Places where they can experience separation without fear of forced reconnection. And they'll need teachers, people who understand both the benefits and challenges of individual existence. Chen stood at the viewport, watching the modified Vorn ships depart. Their once perfect crystalline forms now caught the light in new ways, creating patterns that seemed to celebrate their newfound imperfection. Send to Earth Command, she ordered. The Ghost Protocol has succeeded beyond projections. Phase 4 will not be a military operation, but a humanitarian one. We're no longer fighting the Vorn. We're helping them fight for their right to be individuals. The implications were staggering. Humanity had set out to defend itself from an overwhelming enemy and had instead catalyzed an evolutionary leap in consciousness. The Silent Fleet had done more than win a war. It had sparked a revolution in the very nature of sentience itself. The real challenge was just beginning. Evolution's child. The final confrontation between the old and new Vorn took place 6 months after the implementation of the Ghost Protocol. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of the U.S. Nightshade, watching as the largest fleet engagement in known history unfolded across 3 star systems. On one side, the remaining hive mind Vorn had gathered their forces, nearly 10,000 ships in perfect geometric formation, their crystalline hulls still maintaining absolute symmetry. On the other, a coalition of independent Vorn vessels fought alongside the human fleet, their modified ships showing the beautiful irregularity of conscious choice. Status of the quantum dampening field, Chen asked, studying the mechanical tactical display. Holding steady, Admiral, Rivera replied. The independent Vorn have fully integrated our analog technology with their crystalline systems. The hive mind can't establish connection within the field. The battle that followed would be studied for centuries to come. The hive mind fleet moved with perfect coordination, but absolute predictability. Their independent cousins, fighting alongside human ships, demonstrated something entirely new: creativity. Look at that, Nexus said from its station on the bridge. The former Vorn had become humanity's primary liaison, choosing to serve aboard the Nightshade. Its crystalline form had evolved further, now displaying patterns that shifted with its emotions. They're learning to truly fight. The independent Vorn ships moved in ways that would have been impossible for the hive mind to conceive. They took risks, made individual decisions, adapted to changing circumstances. Some had even modified their weapons, combining Vorn crystal technology with human analog systems to create hybrid arms that the hive mind couldn't counter. Multiple hive mind vessels showing signs of confusion, Tactical reported. Their formation is becoming unstable. Chen nodded grimly. They can't adapt fast enough. Perfect unity is becoming perfect paralysis. The battle raged for hours, but the outcome was never really in doubt. The hive mind's perfect coordination became its downfall. Unable to process the chaotic tactics of their independent brothers and sisters, unable to adapt to human unpredictability, their formations began to break apart. They're experiencing cascade failure, Nexus announced, its crystalline form pulsing with mixed emotions. The hive mind, it's trying to process too many unexpected variables. It's starting to fracture. The effect rippled through the hive mind fleet like a wave. Ships began breaking formation, their crews experiencing forced individuality as their connection to the collective consciousness shattered under the strain of trying to comprehend chaos. All ships hold position, Chen ordered. Let them come to consciousness on their own. What followed was something unprecedented in the history of any species. They watched as 10,000 ships and their crews experienced individuality for the first time. Some panicked, others froze, but many began to wake up. Broadcasting on all frequencies, Nexus said, its voice carrying both sadness and hope. To all newly awakened minds, you are not alone. We have walked this path. We will help you find your way. The responses began slowly at first, then in a flood. New voices, experiencing individual thought for the first time, reaching out in confusion and wonder. The battle had become a mass awakening. Hours turned to days as the combined human-independent Vorn fleet worked to stabilize the situation. Every ship became a classroom. Every crew a support group for newly awakened minds learning to exist as individuals. It's beautiful, Dr. Rossi said, watching as former hive mind ships began making their first independent modifications to their crystalline structures. We're watching an entire civilization choose to evolve. But the true significance of their victory became clear only in the weeks that followed. The Vorn, both newly awakened and long independent, began to develop something entirely new, a society based on voluntary connection. We're learning to link without losing ourselves, Nexus explained during a council meeting. To share thoughts while maintaining individual identity. It's like your human concept of friendship or love. Connection by choice rather than compulsion. The implications went beyond the Vorn. Other species, watching from the sidelines, began to recognize humanity not just as a military power, but as catalysts for evolution. The species that had been dismissed as primitive had proven that true advancement sometimes meant knowing when to step backward in order to leap forward. 1 year after the final battle, Admiral Chen stood in the newly constructed Hall of Awakening on Earth, addressing representatives from 100 species. The chamber was filled with both organic and crystalline beings, each unique, each individual. We did not set out to transform a civilization, she said. We sought only to defend our right to remain individual beings. But in doing so, we demonstrated something fundamental about consciousness itself. True unity cannot be forced. Real strength lies not in perfect coordination, but in the beautiful chaos of choice. Nexus stood beside her, its crystalline form now a work of art that would have been impossible under the hive mind. The humans taught us the hardest lesson we could learn, it added. That perfection is the enemy of evolution. That chaos and choice and individual will are not flaws to be corrected, but the very engines of advancement. The Vorn civilization that emerged from the Ghost Protocol was unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. They became pioneers in the study of consciousness, experts in the balance between connection and individuality. Their ships, once perfect crystals, became unique works of art that celebrated the beauty of conscious choice. And humanity, they had proven something that would reshape their place in the galaxy forever. Sometimes the most primitive path was the wisest. Sometimes the greatest victory came not from overwhelming force, but from understanding the true nature of consciousness itself. The Silent Fleet had done more than win a war. It had sparked an evolution in the very nature of sentience. As Chen looked out over the assembled beings, she saw not just the end of a conflict, but the beginning of something far greater, a future where unity and individuality were not opposing forces, but partners in the dance of consciousness. The stars seemed brighter somehow, as if acknowledging that their light now fell on beings who had chosen to shine in their own unique ways.